I want to bring you a challenge of the situation of evangelism in Europe. And joining me by Zoom is a friend and a missionary, somebody who is working in France, reaching out to those who have not yet heard the gospel. Charles Bavelloni, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you, Chim.
Tell me, Charles, you are there in France. What is the spiritual climate of Europe like today?
Well, thank you for this discussion. As you know, from Europe, the gospel went to Africa and other continents several years back, some centuries back. But it looks like Europe now has become the darkest continent in the world in terms of the gospel. And I believe that God is going to do something else, change the situation. But yes, spiritually speaking, in terms of the gospel, Europe needs the light of the gospel right now. There is a great need for the gospel to come back to where it went to several other countries centuries back.
I see. Now, Charles, can you give us an idea of the statistics of, just to get an idea of what the state of evangelism is in Europe or in France?
Thanks. Just some few days back, we were told that France is now 68 million population. And we know that of this, less than 1% is Christian. So it's a great need. France actually is a mission field. Less than 1% of 68 million can be seen as Christian.
Wow, that's massive. Less than 1% in a place like France that some centuries ago used to send out missionary. In your opinion, why is Europe in the state it is today spiritually?
Yeah, I think that several years of the gospel or the message of the gospel being watered down has brought Europe and France in particular to where we are right now. We need to uphold the message of the gospel. Paul says that this is what saves. The gospel is the power of God for the salvation of whoever, whether Jew or not, whoever. Is the message of the gospel. It was what saves. And when we now begin to divert into other things, and it's what happened centuries back, the church diverted into other things, several other things, religion and other things, and that watered down the gospel. And so we need to come back to the basics of the gospel. What saves, what brings salvation is the message of the gospel. Christ died, buried, rose from the dead. The power of that is what brings salvation. And what will touch Europe is coming back to this gospel, this simplicity of the gospel message.
Charles, I know that for centuries a lot of cathedrals and beautiful massive buildings, churches buildings were built all around Europe, and today we see those buildings everywhere, but we don't find people in them. What do you think is a lesson in all of that for us today?
Yeah, we need to build men and not to build just structures. We need to build men, and that's what Christ did. Jesus built men. The men he that were around, that were with him, he built them. He told Peter, I will make you fishers of men. So it's a making of men and women that will stand for Christ, not just investing huge amount of money in building structures. Why we don't raise men, build them to the character of Christ, we will end up the way Europe is now. Although I have hope that God will turn things around.
Charles, there is a lot of Africans rushing into Europe, as you know. And how, in your opinion, how do you see this influx of Africans into Europe in light of the big spiritual need of Europe?
I believe that if the African church was really mission-minded and geared towards the salvation of Europe or the Western world in general, when African believers are moving to Europe or any of these Western nations, we will make them see themselves as missionaries. You are not just going there for economic reasons. You You are going there, taking the gospel to them. You are going to work. Yes, they will pay you to preach the gospel. But unfortunately, most African leaders preparing an African believer going to a Western country is more of the economic reasons, the economic factor that you are going to benefit than going to take the gospel there. But if the African church was to prepare, equip those going to the Western world from Africa, probably for economic reasons, but also to see themselves as missionaries taking the gospel, that would have made a big difference. But some of them come over, even lose their faith in pursuit of economic factors. And those that are able to keep their faith, they don't really see themselves as missionaries. Yes, we have several churches planted by Africans in Europe, but that missionary factor of coming over to bring Europeans back to Christ, back to the gospel, it's yet to really be seen as a vision for the African church and African believers coming over to Europe.
Charles, there's also the large influx of people from the Muslim world like never before, refugees from the Arab world pouring into Europe. How important is it to reach these ones in Europe?
Well, since 2014, as we all saw in the news, many people poured in from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, and all that. So yes, we have many immigrants from these nations, Africa as well, Sudan and other sub-Saharan African nations. In France, there have always been people from Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, some of these French-speaking North African nations. They've been here for many years. But then these last days, we've had people pouring from Sudan, Eritrea, and other sub-Saharan African nations. Yeah, so there is the need to really reach out to these immigrants who have come from Iraq, Syria, Sudan, or all these nations for whatever reasons they came in, either because of the war or for other economic factors. There is a great need to touch these people with the gospel.
As we wrap up, Charles, speak to our viewers. In the light of the challenge of evangelism in Europe, what can one do?
Well, anytime we talk about the gospel and what we can do, I think the first thing is to pray. That's what the Lord said. Pray the Lord of the harvest. So yeah, I think we need to begin to look at Europe as a mission field. And then the invitation from the Lord is pray the Lord of the harvest. And the next thing is to pray that he will send laborers into the harvest field. And I believe some African believers can't really be called into this harvest field, but coming with a vision of seeing lives saved, not just for economic factors, but with a vision of bringing souls into the gospel. So pray and consider, if God will call you, why not come join the harvest field? For the harvest is truly plentiful in Europe.
Thank you so much, Charles, for joining me today and sharing this insight about Europe with us. That's Charles Bavelloni, who is a missionary in France, winning souls for Christ over there. And if you've heard him, maybe you want to give, maybe you want to go, maybe you want to pray for the harvest field in Europe, please use the contact on the screen and we'll send you the information you need today. Truly, it's harvest time in Europe. Now, this is where we'll say bye-bye for today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll see you same station, same time next week. Please like this video and leave a comment below. Let's know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell button and share this video with somebody else.